Well, hi and welcome everybody. It's 7 o'clock now, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started with a little intro while we give everyone a few more seconds to join us if they're running a little late. I am Laura De Palma, the marketing manager here at Renew International, and I am delighted to be joined by Joseph Nuzzi, our president and executive director here at Renew. He's going to be doing most of the talking tonight, but I am going to wear your ears thin for just a moment. I would just want to cover a few housekeeping items. If you can please keep yourselves muted, most of you will be automatically just by being on the webinar, but just in case, just so that the conversation rolls smoothly. At the end, we will be leaving a little bit of time for question and answer. So if you have any thoughts, any comments, any questions that you'd like to ask, we do have both the Q&A box and the chat box open today, so feel free to type your thoughts in there. If you have a question that you'd like us to address live on the webinar, we're happy to do that with as much time as we have left. And I think that's everything. If you have any technical difficulties, you can definitely feel free to reach out to me there as well. I'll do the best that I can to guide you through them. And most of all, we're here to help you make Advent as fruitful and holy as it possibly can be. So I hope you are all looking forward to a wonderful Christmas season with your friends and family. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful president, Joe Nuzzi.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I know you need to hop off to help the Spanish community, who's also doing a webinar on Advent
I'm
with
going to be here.
you.
I'm just going to be bouncing between so that I can help the most people that I possibly can.
You do what you need to do, but thank you so much for your help.
My
Folks,
pleasure. Happy to be here.
and Laura will be back, hopefully,
Yes.
if she doesn't get caught up in technological messes over there. But
Like the
Laura, thank
Terminator,
you so
I
much.
will always be back.
Uh, it's great to see all of these names. I would prefer to see people's faces. I would actually prefer to do this in person, but this is great that I see names from people from different parts of the country, and that is a blessing of modern technology. I see my old office mate, Sister Louise, on there, so she could be giving this webinar, and I could be the student, but it's nice to see familiar names. So in the past, well, first of all, welcome to Renew International. And for those of you who are familiar with us, our mission is to build small Christian communities throughout the church and revitalize our parishes by really founding our communities as a community of communities. That mission at Renew is almost 50 years old, and I think post-pandemic, it's more vital than ever. So for those of you who are committed to the mission of building small Christian communities throughout the church, I commend you, and I pray that you have all the energy you need to continue to do this work. It's vitally needed. I just read an article in the New York Times yet again, which references basically the pandemic of loneliness that's going on in our society, and especially among the young, which is very sad. So while tonight is not specifically about small Christian communities, obviously at the end of this webinar, I'm going to invite you to consider inviting people into small groups during the Advent season. It's not as popular as Lent in the Catholic imagination for doing something, but it does give us an opportunity to invite people. So we will get to that. In the past, I know before I came on board again at Renew, that Renew is basically hosting small Christian community meetings online during the season of Advent. While I think that was perfectly appropriate during the pandemic, I felt that post-pandemic, our job needs to be to return to our mission to kind of help train and empower people to do that work in their parishes. But I didn't want to kind of leave people abandoned who were used to doing something for Advent during, with Renew during the season. And I thought maybe we can do a little adult faith formation and talk about the season of Advent kind of as a theological topic. Then with the invitation, well, how do we celebrate it? So that's what I would like to do tonight. And so I like to start with an agenda. I always like to have goals for today's webinar. And for those of you who were with the webinar with us on Many Voices, One Spirit, you know that that's the way I like to proceed. Keeps us nice and organized. So what I'd like to cover tonight is, well, what is Advent? I used to teach courses when I was working in adult faith formation at the Church of St. Francis of Assisi in New York City which if you ever visit New York, definitely visit the Church of St. Francis of Assisi. I used to teach courses on the liturgical year. So I think it's good to ground ourselves. Well, what is the season? And what does the season invite us to contemplate? And so we can kind of approach the season and make it fruitful for us spiritually. The church is explicit. Advent is not Lent. And it's kind of funny, any of you who may have worked on maybe your liturgy team at your parish, or you might have responsibility in leadership for liturgy. You may have come across the little battle of the colors, where some churches were trying to use blue for Advent, but the color for Advent is purple. But then why is it purple? Because Lent is purple, and what's the difference? And if you read the liturgical documents, it actually says the color of Advent is purple, but not the same purple as Lent, which is kind of funny to me, because I'm like, well, just give us the numbers and we'll go find what purple we're supposed to use. Clearly, in the mind of the church, Advent and Lent are different. So we want to look at those differences tonight in tonight's webinar. This one's important to me. I lived in New York for almost 19 years. I just moved back to New Jersey for resuming my work at Renew. And in New York City, the challenges to celebrating Advent are legion. It is not easy to celebrate Advent, and I want to talk about what is the challenge to us as Catholics to celebrate this sacred season in the context of our culture, and what do we do about that? And then we're going to end with some practical suggestions for making this season sacred for us, and of course, Q&A, because, as much as possible, I like to have discussions and not have this be one way. So that's the way we're going to proceed. Let's get started. All right. I do love the liturgy, and I love the history of the liturgy. I think my master's degree is in biblical studies, but I think if I went back to grad school today, I might choose to study the liturgy because I love it that much. Historically speaking, if you look at the liturgical calendar, and many of us have that calendar from LTP with all the different colors, and a shout out to my friends at LTP. So if you think of the liturgical calendar, you have two sections of green for ordinary time, and then there's these two large sections. They're like two pillars of the liturgical calendar. The Easter cycle, and I would love one day, maybe I'll do a whole course for Renew, if you would all like to join on the liturgical calendar. But you have the Easter cycle, which starts at Ash Wednesday and is not finished until Pentecost. It is over 90 days. So if you think about as a percentage of the calendar, the Easter cycle is the biggest special piece of our calendar. It shows us that Easter is the most important holiday to us as Christians. That developed historically first. The second cycle to develop in the history of the church, and it didn't really happen until the 4th century, post-Council of Nicaea, was the Christmas cycle. And the Christmas cycle begins first with the celebration of Christmas and all the Christmas feasts that traditionally ended with the Epiphany. So we got the 12 days of Christmas, except you had Candlemas, the Feast of the Presentation of the Lord, all the way over in February 2nd. Those two things, the Easter cycle and the Christmas season, came first. But it didn't take long for the church to develop Advent. And if you do any studies in the history of the liturgy, you will find that the development of Advent across Europe did not happen in a unified way. It happened differently in different places and for different reasons. Some of the first references to what we call Advent really came about in different parts of Europe, mainly in Northern Europe, in what is today France, and it was called St. Martin's Lent. Now, what was this about? It's probably why we have purple as the color for Advent. In the early centuries of the church, the main preferred day to baptize people was the Easter Vigil. And the church developed a 40-day fast prior to the Easter Vigil, known as Lent, to prepare people for the celebration of the sacraments. It didn't take long before the church needed another day of the year to celebrate baptism. And the church chose, interestingly enough, the end of the Christmas season, which in the West was the Epiphany, always closely associated also with the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord. So when they started baptizing people on the Feast of the Epiphany, the church knew, wait, we need to have a period of preparation for baptism. And so they created a penitential season prior to the celebration of baptisms at the Epiphany. And in order to make it a 40-day fast, it had to stretch all the way to the Feast of St. Martin, which I believe is November 11th. So it just passed, the traditional Feast of St. Martin. Because you have to subtract out all the days that you're not fasting, like Sunday, like Christmas, all those days. So that was some of the earliest references to the development of this season. In Milan, under the influence of St. Ambrose, the Ambrosian Rite kept a longer Advent season. They have to this day in Milan, Advent starts 6 weeks before Christmas. And so the Ambrosian Rite is a little bit different, but it was a season of preparation for Christmas. It was not a penitential season in preparation for baptism at Epiphany. In the Roman Rite, and all of these things kind of are developing in parallel, but in the Roman ritual, the Roman Church always had 4 Sundays before Christmas as a preparation to celebrate the Feast of the Incarnation of the Lord. And in the Roman Rite, it was always explicit that this was not primarily penitential. Okay? It had penitential overtones. There were some penitential practices, but the Roman ritual always saw Advent as slightly different. And we're going to talk about those differences. So today, obviously, being mainly Roman Catholics, we have a 4-Sunday season. And I say 4 Sundays because depending on how the Sundays fall, it might not be 4 full weeks. So we have a 4-Sunday season to prepare us to celebrate the mystery of the Incarnation. That's what Advent is in the Roman Church today. Again, if you fly to Milan and it's the Sunday before Thanksgiving and you go to church, you will be in Advent. If you take the train to Rome, you will no longer be in Advent. You'll be back in ordinary time. So be aware if you're traveling around Italy. Okay, so what does the Roman ritual invite us to contemplate? What is the season of Advent for us? The liturgical year is not intended to be like a mystery play presenting for us year after year the life of Christ. People kind of get this sense that, oh, well, we remember before Jesus was born, and then poof, Jesus was born, and then he grows up awfully fast over the Christmas season. And then he's doing his missionary work, and then he goes to the desert, and then he dies, and then he rises, and then it happens all over again. That's not what the liturgical year is. First of all, it doesn't fit too well and doesn't really make sense that way. The liturgical year presents to us the totality of the mystery of Christ. And it invites us to contemplate different parts of the mystery of Christ at different seasons. But Jesus is always fully present to us. The heart of the mystery of Christ and the biggest pillar of the liturgical year is the Easter cycle and the Paschal mystery of the death and resurrection of Christ. So I like to say to people, if you look at Easter from Ash Wednesday all the way to Pentecost, the whole Easter cycle, it asks us to contemplate, how did Jesus save us? How does Jesus save us? the Advent Christmas cycle invites us to contemplate, who is Jesus that I meet? Who is Jesus? So Christmas focuses on the incarnational part of the mystery of Christ. Easter focuses us on the Paschal mystery part of the mystery of Christ. But it's always Jesus in his totality. Okay? Well, I just covered that. I forgot to click. So Advent is when we celebrate and remember how Christ is present to us and prepares us to meet Christ. Okay, that's what Advent does. It invites us to celebrate how Christ is present to us now, today, and invites us, strangely enough, to prepare to meet Christ. Because in Advent, Christ is present to us in 3 ways. Okay? Christ is always present to us now, today, in the present moment, especially in the celebration of the liturgy, any of the liturgies of the church, the Eucharist being the pinnacle, the source and summit of our life as Christians, when Christ is fully present to us in the Eucharist. Advent also invites us to remember that the one who is present to us today is the one who was born in the stable in Bethlehem 2,000 plus years ago. And we kind of remember what it was like for Israel to long for Christ, that they waited for God's final ultimate revelation. And if you look at the liturgy of Advent, if you open up the first Sunday of the Advent season, you get end of the world readings, the second coming of Christ. That while Christ is present to us now, we still wait in hope for the fullness of the revelation of Christ to us in the future. That all of history will culminate in meeting Christ. Okay? So Advent kind of invites us to contemplate Christ who will come in the future. And you see that especially the first Sunday of Advent in all 3 cycles, Christ who was born 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem, in time and space, just as we share time and space, and Christ who is with us right now today. And I better be ready to meet the Christ who was born 2,000 years ago, who is coming in the future, and who is right in front of me right now. So that's what Advent invites us to contemplate. So how is this different from Lent? So Lent is penitential. Like the call to Lent, right from the beginning of Ash Wednesday, is turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel. Lent has an element of conversion. Lent really invites us to take a good hard look at our lives and say, yeah, I'm not totally living up to my baptismal promises as well as I should be, or as well as I could be. I could do better, and I may have been going off track. And the beauty of God's love and mercy and the beauty of the church's liturgical season is that every time Ash Wednesday comes around, we get a whole new chance to start again. So every time, I think that's why Ash Wednesday is so popular with Catholics. It's like our real New Year's. It's like, oh, we get to start over. We made it to Ash Wednesday. God's going to give me a whole new chance. God gives us a whole new chance every day and every minute. But for us as human beings stuck in time and space, we need those tangible things to remind us of that. And the ashes on our forehead are a great reminder. And apparently we all love them because people come in droves. Even people who we don't see that often come back. But that's the spirit of Lent. It's penitential. It's conversion. It's I got to do better. Advent is different. Advent is preparatory. And that's, I think, why, if you read the liturgical books in detail, it says the color of Advent is purple, but not purple like Lent is purple. It's a different purple. So what's the difference between preparation and penitential? I would invite everybody to think about a scenario. And I went too fast on my slide, so ignore that. But I wanted you to think about a scenario in your life. And the scenario is this: someone you love deeply is coming to visit. Maybe it's a relative, maybe it's a beloved cousin, aunt or uncle, niece or nephew, brother or sister. Maybe it's a friend that you're really close with. This person that you love deeply is coming to visit you. They will be staying in your home. Think about what you do in the days and weeks prior to their arrival. Right? Most of us would get busy. And part of that busyness, yes, might include, I got to clean this place up and get it ready. It's looking a little dusty and shabby. I got to clean. Yeah, that might be part of it. You also might freshen up the towels. You also might get new bed linens. You also might go out and do some food shopping. And you might prepare desserts or special meals and have everything ready. What you definitely would not do is cut into the pumpkin pie that you baked for your friend before they get there, so that you serve them 3/4 of a pie and you were like, well, I was hungry, I had a piece. No, we know how to prepare for the visit, the advent of somebody we love. That, I think, is the spirituality of Advent. It says to us, we long for the arrival of Christ. And just like Lent lets us remember that we need to be about our baptismal promises and possibly change things if we need to, Advent reminds us that I truly long for Christ. I long for what Christ brings. I want Christ to be present in my life, and I will prepare. Now think of the attitude you have while you're doing all those preparatory things, knowing that someone you love is coming to visit. Like if you have to clean the house, and it's just because it's time to clean the house, it might not be too particularly fun. But if you're cleaning the house because your best friend is coming to visit, you have to admit there's a different attitude, there's a different emotion that goes into that. If you're preparing a meal for somebody you love, what is the emotion that already creeps into the preparation that kind of really belongs for that person's arrival? And it's usually joy, right? I'm happy to do these things because I know who's coming. So Advent really calls us to tap into those feelings, that spirituality that I truly long for Christ. I want the Lord to return. I want the Lord to be present in my life. If I could have been there in Bethlehem, I would have liked to have seen Christ laying in that manger. That's Advent, right? And so when you look at the readings of the Advent season, they remind us, especially Cycle C that's coming up this December, they remind us, one, to prepare for the coming of the Lord at the end. Now, how are we called to prepare? It definitely does not say quit your job, stick your head under a rock, or any of those crazy things that people might do when they think the sky is falling. No, the call in the scriptures is be ready. Be ready, because you never know when they're going to arrive. But that be readiness should come for the Christian with a sense of joy. And then John the Baptist appears as an adult in the scriptures in Cycle C. And John is asked, well, how do we get ready? And John says, basically, be people of justice and mercy and compassion. That's how you prepare. Right? And it's not until the end of the season that we start to remember that the one we're preparing for was the one who humbled himself enough for us to be born into poverty and laid in a manger. That's the cycle of the Advent season. All right? And that's why I really feel like Gaudete Sunday, the third Sunday of Advent, when all of a sudden they take out pink robes, which of course I can't see because I'm colorblind, is the key to the season. Advent is about joy, but it's a joy that comes from preparing for the arrival of the one we love. It's the coming of Christ. It is not yet the full celebration. Advent is preparation for Christmas, okay? And we need to be about the business of preparing. I think it's a beautiful season. I feel like Advent, if we celebrate it for ourselves properly, we should be asking ourselves, does Christ really bring me joy? Does knowing the Lord and the Lord's presence in my life really give meaning to my life? Does it make me happy to know that Christ is the one who will come at the end and set all things right? Those are beautiful things to contemplate. And in the busyness of the rest of the year, sometimes we're about all other things. Advent is like, wait a minute, remember who it is that you celebrate and who it is that you follow and what it is that he does for us. Okay? I love that line from St. Augustine. Our hearts are restless, Lord, until they rest in you. That's kind of the spirituality of Advent. Reconnect with the fact that, yeah, we're restless, but we know where the rest for our heart comes from, and it comes from Christ. I love that about the Advent season. But as I mentioned, there is a problem. And the problem is that we live in a culture that totally basically obliterates Advent. And Advent, while it's about waiting and preparing, if you watch the Macy's parade on Thanksgiving, you know how the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade ends. And it ends with the arrival of Santa Claus. Okay, we'll do a whole webinar maybe one day on, well, who's Santa Claus and what's that all about? But we know what happens. Macy's launches Christmas on Thanksgiving. And maybe in the past, we thought that was bad enough. But nowadays, it's like Halloween launches Christmas. Our culture celebrates Christmas before Christmas. Think about when you get invited to Christmas parties. Most of us get invited to Christmas parties during Advent, right? We often receive gifts from people we are not going to see at Christmas, if we get gifts from them, prior to Christmas. Right? So our culture skips Advent and jumps right into Christmas. There was a time when Christmas trees would be set up on December 24th and lit that night or the next day to celebrate the incarnation, the birth of the Lord, right? Nowadays, people light their Christmas trees at Thanksgiving. So we have an issue in our culture, and the issue is that while Christmas is our holiday, that holiday has a 4-Sunday preparatory season before it, and our culture just bulldozes that out of the way. So we need to kind of figure out how to navigate this. One thing I do not recommend is trying to fight the culture in its totality. I mean, we would have to basically move to a cave to avoid the celebration of Christmas before Christmas. It's not going to work. And it's especially not going to work if you have kids, because the kids are going to be like, wait a minute, why is it that all my friends put up their Christmas trees already and we haven't? And you can try to teach them about Advent and waiting and all of that, but you also don't want to make it so that we're so countercultural that it makes Advent kind of burdensome, or it makes us completely out of tune with the rest of our society. But I do think we need to be intentional about how we celebrate Advent. Otherwise, we're going to risk the beauty of the season and the contemplation, as I mentioned, of this idea that we long for Christ, that we need to get in touch with that. You know, the book of Revelation, which scares most people, which is supposed to be a letter of good news to those of us who believe, the book of Revelation ends with the church pleading, "Come, Lord," Maranatha. It's a call for the Lord to return. Okay, it's an Advent call. So how are we going to do this? How can we be intentional about how we're going to celebrate the season of Advent? Now, I am not an expert on spiritual practices that buck the dominant culture. These are just some ideas that I'd like to offer. At the Q&A, I would also love to hear some of your ideas for how we make Advent the sacred season it's supposed to be. So if you have ideas and you have best practices, it's great for us to share them. But here are some of mine. Make more time for prayer. Okay? You know, you're not going to probably skip all of the Christmas parties that you get invited to during Advent. Right? I'm hoping we all have people in our lives that want to see us before Christmas. I personally, I have with my small Christian community, which happens to be the RCA team at the Church of St. Francis of Assisi, where I used to work. They are my small Christian community. I always host a brunch on the Feast of the Epiphany, because we don't see each other during Christmas, but we all are back for the Feast of the Epiphany. I host our Christmas party for our small Christian community on January 6th. And I actually use, as much as possible, January 6th. I know it's on Sunday, but anyway, I like to celebrate the Christmas season. But most of us are going to go to some kind of Christmas party during the season of Advent. Don't fight it. But what I'm suggesting is add more time for prayer. For myself, I like to add in either morning or evening prayer from the Liturgy of the Hours. I know some of you on this call are probably like, Joe, I do that every day. I sometimes fall off the wagon of saying my intentional morning prayers and evening prayers from the liturgy. Advent is a time I love to go back to the Liturgy of the Hours. There are plenty of apps for those of us who are not as expert in saying the Liturgy of the Hours, which you can get on your phone. You can listen to it on your commute. So there are ways to pray this, but make more time for prayer. It doesn't have to be the Liturgy of the Hours. You can invite your family to make more time for prayer around the Advent wreath. Give the Advent wreath in your home a place of honor. And especially if you have kids, invite them into that ritual that reminds them of what the season is about in our anticipation and waiting for the coming of Christ. All right. I also suggest try to build, especially if you have kids, a crescendo to Christmas. In other words, start small. You know, you can build family traditions if you have kids. Maybe you pick a day during the Advent season when you put up the Christmas tree. Maybe you don't put it up on Thanksgiving. My mom, for some reason, decided long ago, I don't know why, that the Feast of the Immaculate Conception was the day to put up the Christmas tree. Okay, that's what my family did. You can put up the Christmas tree and not light it. You could wait to light it to another point. But build a crescendo up to Christmas so that there's a buildup of that energy and emotion, and it's not frenetic right from the beginning. If you think about it, the liturgy itself has within it a crescendo to Christmas. For those of you who pray the Liturgy of the Hours, you know that at December 17th, all of a sudden we get our liturgical countdown to Christmas with the O antiphons. And so within the liturgy, there's this shift that happens from contemplating the second coming of Christ at the beginning of the season to a contemplation of the time when Israel was waiting for the birth of the Lord 2,000 years ago. You can mimic that in different ways at home, okay? You can add decorations a little at a time. Another thing in my family, which I know the pure liturgists would probably yell at me for this, but we never put baby Jesus in the manger until after midnight mass on Christmas. And we used to have a little ceremony. We used to sing Silent Night. when I was a kid, and we used to put baby Jesus in the manger. Okay? It's for kids. Yes, we don't believe Jesus is born again every year on December 25th. But it's not bad for kids to practice that, to remember and to be reminded that the celebration of Christmas begins now. It doesn't begin at Thanksgiving. Oh, I already talked about this a bit, but don't try to fight the culture. It's not going to work. The powers, the forces that be are such that it's nearly impossible. However, don't be swept up by it either. Plan your Advent. Figure out ways that you are going to make it a season of awaiting and preparation and a contemplation of our longing for Christ. Quiet time. I do think that's important, and in a way, it's more important than ever in that crazy season. I mean, if you come from a family that still exchanges gifts, or if you have especially a lot of little kids in your family, I find it exhausting to go shopping. Not everybody does. I find it exhausting. But even if you don't do all the gifts part of the Christmas season, you know, a lot of people do spend time preparing and decorating and maybe baking cookies and doing, and while they're all great, it can be a lot, especially when we have busy schedules already. So try to create a little quiet time. Maybe you sit with your Advent wreath. Give yourself 20 minutes of quiet contemplation. If you don't want to pray through that whole time, there's different ways to contemplate. Put some music on in the background. Maybe you don't have 20 minutes. Maybe you just sit and play O Come, Emmanuel, and give yourself 5 minutes with that song. But do something that gives you a little space during the season. Now, what do I mean by incorporate prayer and contemplation into the preparations? What's that? How is that different from what I said above, make more time for prayer? What I mean by this is, and I think this is a great spiritual practice. If you're going to be buying Christmas gifts for someone, say a prayer for them while you're looking for that gift. Make it intentional that you're doing this because you love them, not out of a sense of obligation, not out of feeling like, oh, they gave me a gift, so I have to give them a gift, but offer up a prayer for that person. Whatever it might be. Maybe there's an intention they need, or maybe it's just that the Lord continue to bless them. If you're going to be baking Christmas cookies, say a prayer for all your family and friends that are going to enjoy those, that it might help them celebrate the birth of Christ with more joy and more happiness. That's what I mean by incorporating prayer into what you're doing so that the doing becomes contemplative. Okay? Now, I would not be the president of Renew International if I did not say this, and it's not just a plug, but gather with your small Christian community. You know, you could ask yourself at a gathering of your small Christian community for all 4 weeks of Advent, do you long for the Lord? And what's that longing like? You could use that all through the season. Obviously, you can use that question in reflection of the scriptures. Is it difficult to make time for your small Christian communities during Advent? Yes. If you're responsible for a parish, the way I was, we used to do soup and scripture on Monday nights of Advent. And it wasn't as popular as Lent, but it was still popular. And people like to gather in their small communities, or at least have the opportunity. I think it's a great idea to put on the calendar at least 1 day a week during Advent, I'm going to dedicate towards prayer. Not shopping, not preparing any other way, not decorating. I'm going to prepare by praying with my people. So please gather with your small Christian community. There are tons of resources. Renew has some excellent ones, which have individual reflections and small community reflections on the Sunday scriptures. But there's a plethora of lectionary-based resources out in the world. You don't have to buy ours. Please buy ours, though. No. But gather with your small Christian communities. And invite people in your parishes, if you're responsible for your parish, to do the same. Also, keep in mind, not everybody has a huge family or a group of friends to celebrate with. The holidays can exacerbate feelings of loneliness for certain people. People who are grieving the loss of someone might need to be gathered in prayer with other members of the community to get them through, because the holidays can be difficult. Meredith Augustin, who just joined the Renew staff, just emailed everybody grieving the loss of a loved one at the holidays as a free one-time resource. Maybe you do that. For some reason, on my mother's side of the family, most of the people on my mom's side of the family died between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I don't know why. It's very bizarre, but it made the holidays difficult for my mom. So that happens to people, and we should be aware of it. And when you get in a small Christian community, it creates the space for us not be aware of it. Let me say that better. It creates the space where we can be aware of what our brothers and sisters might be going through. So please, 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 don't say, uh-oh, I think I just lost my screen. Don't say nobody's going to join a group during, uh-oh, I think I just lost the ability to share, but I hope you're still all here.
I can pull it up for you, Joe. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. I was like, what happened? I talked it to death, but I'm almost done. I can just share again. Anyway, so I think that was the end of my slides anyway. At this point, what I was going to do is invite people to kind of think about how you celebrate Advent. There it is. Yeah, Laura, can we go ahead one slide? I think I'm up to Q&A. Yeah, Laura is so good to me. Anyway, those are some of my, actually, Laura, can we go back one slide? Now it's like voice command. Thank you.
Absolutely. Give me 1 second.
These are some of my suggestions, folks. They are not, Moses did not have these in his other arm coming down the mountain. These are some of the things that I like to do and that I have in my experience try to build when I've worked at a parish or in my own life. But again, I'm not an expert on how do we make Advent the most sacred season we possibly can. So what I would like to do is give you a chance to digest what is the season of Advent, a time for us to contemplate, do we long for Christ? And what is it that longing does for us? When we prepare for the coming of Christ, are we filled with a sense of joy? Because the one who will come in the future is the same one who is with us today and is the same one who was humble enough to be born in that stable in Nazareth. Nobody is afraid of baby Jesus in the manger. Not Nazareth, Bethlehem. Nobody's afraid of baby Jesus in the manger. Well, folks, that's the same Christ who will come at the end, the same Christ who is with us today. Okay, so Advent kind of brings all of that to us to contemplate. And then how do we celebrate the season? Prayer, Advent wreath, building up toward Christmas. All of those are just some suggestions I have. Oh, I even forgot, for those of you who might be Italian or Filipino or Latino, there are Christmas novenas, Simbang Gabi, the Posadas, which are ways also to build a crescendo to Christmas through a novena. And sometimes people have those cultural traditions during Advent as a way to build up toward Christmas. I forgot to mention those. Anyway, I'm open to taking questions. I'm also open to taking other suggestions for the larger group on other ways that you think we can make Advent a sacred season.
So, can you hear me? Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Wonderful. So we have a couple of questions. One of them came from a little bit earlier in the webinar when we were kind of talking about the liturgical colors. They want to know why the color changes to pink for one Sunday, for a single Sunday.
Uh, it's not a single Sunday. Pink happens twice during the liturgical year. Pink in the Catholic Church represents joy, and it is the liturgical color for the third Sunday of Advent and the fourth Sunday of Lent. It is Gaudete Sunday and Laetare Sunday. So Joy Sunday and Rejoice Sunday, or something like that. But pink, if you look at the liturgical calendar carefully, pink can be brought back during Lent also. It also marks when you pass the halfway point through the season. Lent is a season of fasting. And so the pink also is a reminder that you've made it more than halfway through the season. I guess when Advent had a fast associated with it, which it did. And honestly, folks, you could still add a fast into Advent. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But again, it's a fast, kind of like not eating the apple pie until your guests arrive, right? It's a preparatory fast. But anyway, the pink that represents joy, and it is after the halfway point of the season. So it does come in twice during the liturgical year. I have never seen a priest wear pink during Lent, though.
Neither have I must be honest.
But look it up. I'm not making it up.
We have a comment from Sister Louise that said there are beautiful Advent songs and she likes to spend time praying with songs. So if you're looking for an alternative to constant 24/7 Christmas music that started sometime around Labor Day now, it's been running for quite a while. There are definitely Advent songs that can help you kind of prepare for the season and not even get sick of all the Christmas carols that you've been hearing.
Yeah, I wonder if Louise would. I mentioned O Come, Emmanuel, which is based on the O antiphons, but maybe Louise can give us one or two suggestions. Or you can just look in your missals at church. Look in the Advent section.
We also have a question. How can we find all of the Advent traditions like the O antiphons and Jesse's tree? Where do we find them?
Well, the O antiphons are actually, they introduce the Magnificat for evening prayer in the Liturgy of the Hours. So if you pray the evening prayer in the Liturgy of the Hours, you will come across them. They introduce the Magnificat each evening from the 17th to the 24th. At the Church of St. Francis of Assisi, I used to post them on our social media, and I used to put them on the church website for people to pray along during the season. And maybe, since Laura is in charge of our social media, we can do that at Renew for everyone. So you can just stay tuned to our Instagram or our Facebook. And
It's
maybe we'll
already
do
on the schedule. If you follow us on social media, you'll see the O antiphons every day leading up to Christmas.
Yay.
Somebody else asked, that you talked about cultural novenas and other cultural traditions. Are there any family-friendly Advent traditions? Because it might be hard to get our kids to pray a full novena, but are there any family-friendly traditions that we can use to get them involved and sort of build up that anticipation?
Absolutely. There's the Advent wreath I think is one of the best, and it's a great way to have the kids involved, have them, if they're old enough, have them help light the Advent wreath and intentionally say a small prayer. There's Advent calendars. There are a number of ways. I would, Renew does mainly more adult faith formation, but there are plenty of resources that Catholic publishers that publish kids stuff. I'm sure that would have ideas for how to get kids involved in the celebration of Advent. I believe in making the faith fun for kids. And, like if you do even small things like, okay, the Advent wreath, and then we're going to decorate the tree, and you do it slowly, and you tell them, well, we're going to be celebrating Christ's birth at Christmas. Now we're preparing for it. They'll get into it. It doesn't have to always be explicitly like sit down and pray time. I think, especially for kids, make it fun. in the Italian tradition, a lot of families, it's more for a Christmas holiday, a Christmas celebration, but they would from December 25th until January 6th, they would move the statues of the wise men closer and closer to the nativity scene in the house. So the kids would move the camels a little closer each day. Anything like that gets the kids to think about the faith, I think is great.
Great, thank you. Sister Louise answered, she said that she recommended the Jesse tree, just like one of our other attendees said the Jesse tree was a great Advent tradition.
See, that's one I didn't have growing up. That's why I like doing these things and you have the wisdom of the community.
And we have one of our participants actually recommended one of our own resources and said the O antiphons are included in our Waiting for the Joy booklet. So if anyone wants to take a look at that, that's one of our Advent resources that we offer in English. We do have several. We have a new one this year, The Lord is Near, and we have others, but the O antiphons are particularly in Waiting for Joy, and they'll also be featured on our social media as well.
And for those of you who don't know what the O antiphons are, they are basically titles of Christ that are mainly gleaned from the book of Isaiah, but other parts of the Old Testament. And they do introduce the Magnificat during evening prayer. They date back to the Middle Ages. And they are the source for the song we all know, O Come, Emmanuel.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And the last comment that was sent in, I think he's a friend of yours, is from Ed Fursa. He says hi.
Hi, Ed.
Ed says
Ed's
hi.
here in New Jersey. He used to take all my classes at St. Francis. He probably also took my class on the liturgical year.
It's funny, I just came, for anyone who's interested, I just came from a religion class this afternoon, and we had the kids in church, and they asked, why do they keep changing the colors of the banners? I was like, I'm so glad you asked. Let's talk about liturgical colors, because we have another color change coming up. So it really tied in nicely.
And
but
kids love that stuff.
They do. It's really a way to get them into it, right?
For sure.
Yeah, but we have answered all the questions that came in now. If anyone else has questions, we'll be around for another couple minutes. But thank you so much, Joe, for your wonderful presentation, and to everyone who was able to join us tonight. I hope you found it useful and fruitful. We will be sending out a recording later this week in case you want to share it with anyone in your community, with your family, if you want to rewatch it. And also for people who signed up but weren't able to join us tonight. So definitely keep an eye out for that.
And our emails are on the website. My email is joen@renewintl.org. If anybody has any comments or questions or suggestions for things that you want to hear from Renew in the future, it doesn't always have to be me. I happen to do 2 webinars in 2 days, but we have many people on staff who are extremely talented, and we have a network of people around the country who have worked with Renew, who also do webinars. So we hope that these are helpful for people in terms of your own faith, and that you take it forward into your communities.
That's true. We're always here to help. So please always feel free to reach out. And we just want to help you make your community and your personal faith life the best.
Maybe we'll have Sister Louise come back and do a guest webinar with us.
That would be wonderful. Why not? Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful evening and a wonderful Advent season to come, and a very Merry Christmas when we get that far, but not too early. And thank you all for being with us tonight.
Take care, everyone. Was there one more comment? Did I see that?
Sister Louise said, great job, Joe.
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you, Sister Louise.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.